I signed his termination at noon. At 2:10 the fire alarm screamed, and the only person carrying us down the stairs was the man I'd just let go. HR wants a scapegoat. IT wants a confession. He only offers open palms and that steady, impossible calm. So I have one choice left: protect my title, or run after him before the elevator doors close. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe, tap like, and share this video. The more voices we reach, the louder these stories become. And drop your city in the comments. Let's see where love finds us. The marble floors always made everything feel colder than it was. My heels clicked from the elevator to the executive corridor, a staccato metronome reminding me I had something to prove. First week as facilities director at Archer & Cole, first time sitting at the big table, and the COO had sent a polite but razor-edged email at dawn. Please ensure Level 42's corridor is spotless before our 9 a.m. investor walk. I dressed like composure, white silk blouse, high-waisted skirt hugging my hips, hair pinned just so, because I knew how this place looked at women like me. Thick, curvy, sexy was fine for a party, suspect in a boardroom. So I sharpened everything else: posture, tone, expectations. Control what they can't. Halfway down the corridor I stopped. A yellow caution sign stood like a warning. A mop leaned against the wall near a rolling cart. Rags, spray bottles, and a dented thermos with a silver sticker, M. Brooks. Footprints tracked a half-dry, half-wet path toward the server room. "Where is he?" I whispered, checking my watch. 8:34. Someone cleared his throat behind me. I turned too fast and nearly slipped. He caught the sign with one hand before it toppled, quick, steady, precise, and set it right without touching me. "Miss Shaw," he said quietly. "Good morning." He was taller up close than he looked on the schedules, broad shoulders in a dark janitorial polo, sleeves pushed to forearms built by actual work. Malachi Brooks, night shift turned early day cover, if my org chart was right. I'd seen notes: punctual, good with fixes, minimal complaints. But now my schedule sat on the line with a corridor still damp and a server room door cracked open like a wound. "It's 8:35, I said. "This floor should have been cleared 20 minutes ago." His gaze flicked to the server room. "Yes, ma'am. We had an overnight leak that came back. The leak was logged and fixed. Pipe above the cable run. It split again." He kept his voice even, almost gentle. I shut the valve, but water already travelled along the conduit. I needed a vacuum and extra towels. I put the sign so no one slipped. I looked at the streak of damp beneath the baseboard at the server room door, a thin, glittering line. The tech team would skin me alive if anything shorted. "Who authorized you to open that room?" "Security keyed me in when the humidity alarm pinged. You can call." I don't need to call. I did need to breathe. My chest was tight under the silk, my blouse suddenly too warm. "The corridor isn't ready. Investors will be here at 9. "I can finish in 5, he said. 6 tops." "It needed to be finished already," I said, sharper than I meant. "This is executive level. We don't," I swallowed. "We can't afford corners." His lips pressed together like he wanted to choose words carefully. He tilted his head slightly, palms open at his sides in a posture that felt like care, not defense. "I agree, ma'am. I'm not cutting corners. I prioritized the room that would cause the most damage." The logic was good. It still felt wrong. I'd been warned. The last director was too flexible, too friendly, too slow to discipline. I'd nodded through phrases like standards and optics while my spine quietly braced. My body was always an argument I didn't start. My work had to close it. "Policy says corridors first," I said, even though I didn't believe that policy made sense right now. I needed something in my favor. "You deviated." "I did." He didn't flinch. "Because the room had a live issue and the corridor had a sign." A laugh, the thin, polite kind, escaped me. "A sign doesn't dry a floor, Mr. Brooks." "No," he said, soft. "But it keeps people upright while I stop the thing making the new wet." Something in me wanted to smile. I didn't. The elevator pinged down the hall. Time shrank. I pictured a line of suits, glossy shoes, and the COO's glance at my nameplate when they saw a wet sheen under white lights. "Look," I said, "I'm sure you're good at your job, but this isn't the moment to improvise. We have protocols for a reason." "Yes, ma'am." I waited for pushback. It didn't come. That almost irritated me more. "Were you alone on this?" "Rami called out," he said. "I've got floors 40 through 42 this morning." "That's impossible." "Yes, ma'am," he said, as if we agreed on the sky. I started early. The 41st is done. A tiny jealousy stung. His confidence lived in the quiet facts of what he'd already finished. Mine tried to live in being seen doing the right thing at the right time by the right people. Finish now, I said, then take your break. I can skip it, he said. I've got another. Don't, I said quickly. HR could recite the line about breaks in their sleep. Take the break. He nodded once. He didn't ask me to come see the server room, which made me suspicious. He didn't roll his eyes. He just moved, a fluent geometry. Ring, mop, pivot, squeeze, like he'd done this 1,000 times and never once expected applause. I stepped aside, fighting the childish urge to help, to do something with my hands. Directors don't mop. Directors set standards. Directors don't get their skirts wet. By 8:45, the corridor was dry and gleaming. He removed the sign and parked the cart beside the alcove, eyes on the floor, the way a chef looks at a plated dish he knows is right. He wiped a faint streak near a baseboard I wouldn't have noticed. He lifted the thermos, thumb grazing the dent like it mattered. Miss Shaw? Yes. The server room is stable for now. I put fans. But someone should call IT to check the line. The insulation's damp. I hated that my first instinct was pride. He'd done the triage right. My second was panic. If he was right and something fried later, the COO's email would turn into a meeting. I pulled out my phone and left a message for the IT lead, layering my voice with calm. Humidity spike on 42. Please confirm integrity of the cable conduit. Thanks. When I finished, he was still standing there, weight balanced, hands easy. Thank you, I said, and meant it. You're welcome. A beat stretched between us, quiet, close. I saw details I had missed, the small scar cleaving one eyebrow, the callus along his thumb, the way his jaw eased when he listened. He reminded me of the men who fixed our porch steps when I was little, who measured twice and cut once, whose compliments to my mother were always about the tomatoes she grew, never her body. Gentle didn't mean weak. Gentle meant careful. It felt like water finding a path that didn't break anything. You can head down, I said, voice catching. I'll take it from here. He hesitated. Ma'am, are you? His eyes dipped to my shoes. I followed his look. My heel had a microscopic film of cleaner on the edge. A slick half-moon winked. If I turned wrong, I'd glide. He didn't move closer. He didn't reach. He just angled the caution sign back, wordless, and shifted the cart so I could step onto the dry patch. Open palms again. Thank you, I said, softer. You're welcome. He nodded and pushed the cart away. The investors arrived at 8:58, pressed suits, laughter that never quite reached the eyes. The COO's gaze did a quick sweep. Looks good, she murmured. Well done. It should have felt like a small victory. Instead, my chest felt crowded. I kept seeing the thin line of damp under the server door, hearing his calm. I prioritized the room that would cause the most damage. At 11:12, HR pinged me. Heads up, union's concerned about early cover reassignments. We need documentation if you discipline for deviation from protocol. I stared at the message. Discipline. The word sat like a stone in my stomach. This was the part. The adult part. The director part. If I let this slide and something failed later, the story would be, new director looked the other way. If I wrote him up for a deviation that prevented a bigger disaster, the story would be, new director enforces standards even when inconvenient. I picked up the form. It was easy, too easy, to type his name. When he came back up with a coil of towels at noon, I asked him to step into the small conference room. He stood by the glass, hands folded in front of him, posture relaxed in a way that made my spine ache. I have to issue a write-up, I said, for deviating from protocol. He blinked once. Yes, ma'am. It's not a reflection of the fact that you handled the leak well. The word handled felt thin, but we have to be consistent. I understand, he said. May I ask a question? Yes. Is the goal to keep floors safe and equipment working, or to follow the list in the order? If it's the list, I can do that. If it's the other thing, sometimes the order won't work. It's both, I said helplessly. It's everything. He looked at me then, not at the form, not at my tight jaw. At me, not hungry, not challenging. Seeing, it made heat creep beneath my blouse, the kind that wasn't embarrassment so much as exposure. I'll sign, he said. I won't argue. I nodded and slid the paper across. He read it, signed, and handed it back with those steady hands. He didn't ask for a copy. He didn't sigh. Take your lunch, I said, and it sounded like an apology. And thank you for this morning. He tipped his chin. "You're welcome, Miss Shaw." When he left, I curled my hands into fists until half-moons pressed into my palms. Through the glass, he paused by the corridor, set the caution sign precisely where the light hit the floor and revealed a faint streak I'd missed, then moved it when the streak vanished. Careful. He walked toward the elevator without looking back. I looked down at the signature on the form, Malachi Brooks. My own name above it, clean as a blade. The story I was writing for myself suddenly felt smaller than the moment I'd just lived. I told myself I'd done the right thing. I told myself I needed to be seen doing it. Then I tucked the paper into the folder and pretended it didn't feel like the first decision I was going to regret. Don't forget to subscribe for more intense cinematic love stories. Your click helps us make the next chapter. The email landed at 6:07 a.m, subject line brittle as glass, follow-up on 11/12 humidity incident. The body was worse. IT had found oxidation on one of the conduits in the server room. Nothing catastrophic, but the lead CC'd the COO and asked for process adherence to avoid risk. A calendar invite followed before I finished coffee. 10:30 a.m, Conference B. I put on the same armor I always did. Silk, spine, structure, and read the incident report twice in the elevator. By the time the doors opened on 42, a pressure band cinched my ribs. The corridor gleamed, fans gone. The caution sign leaned folded in the alcove, edges aligned like someone who believed in neat exits. Malachi was already moving, a quiet current. He lifted a trash liner with the care of someone handling more than cardboard and coffee lids. His sleeves were pushed to his forearms, a small nick under one thumbnail, a bruise like a thumbprint fading along his wrist. I noticed too much. I told myself it was because managers notice. "Morning, Miss Shaw," he said. "Good morning." I meant to keep walking. "We have a meeting this morning regarding yesterday." He nodded once, steady. "Do you want me there?" Aye. No one had asked that. "It's departmental," I said, defaulting to script. "I'll represent facilities." Understood. I tried to leave the moment uncomplicated, but something tugged. "How's your wrist?" He glanced at it like he had to remember having a body. "Door caught me last week on the loading dock. I'm fine." Under the lights, his jaw had a midnight shadow he must have shaved before shift, but not close enough to silence. The smell of lemon cleaner was soft, not sharp. He moved past me with the cart, and I caught the flash of a sticker on the side, a hand-drawn star, the kind kids give for a job well done. It didn't fit, and it fit exactly. At 10:30 we sat around a rectangle of oak. The COO's smile was the kind people wore to funerals for someone they hadn't liked. A T clicked through slides. Conduit, moisture, the narrow save. The words were simple and heavy. We need a clear chain of command. No improvisation. I said the right things. I said agreed, and we'll tighten process, and I'll ensure documentation. I did not say, he made the call that protected your equipment while your alarm quietly beeped to itself. I didn't know if they'd hear it, even if I shouted. On my way out, HR intercepted me. "We need to resolve yesterday's deviation and today's incident," she said. "Given the unions," she lowered her voice, "concerns, progressive discipline is our safest route, but the COO asked if we should skip steps." "Skip to what?" I asked, though I knew. She tilted her head, sympathetic in the way people are when they believe the rules live above them, not in their hands. "Termination for cause. He prevented a worse outcome," I said, trying not to let my voice tremble. "If he hadn't intervened. The argument is that he entered the room unauthorized." She sighed. "We both know that's technical, but optics matter, and there was an unauthorized early shift change. Because Rami called out, which should have been routed through us." We stood there in the hall, two women holding a conversation like a dripping umbrella, neither wanting to be wet, both getting damp. "Can I speak to him before we decide?" I asked. "Document it," she said gently, "and if we move forward, we'll need security present. I'll ping you." The ping came at 1:03 p.m. The rest of the day had the feeling of a headache before the pain, a slow blur at the edges. I found Malachi on 40, quietly refastening a loose plate on an outlet with a tiny screwdriver I'd never have thought to carry. He looked up when I said his name like I wasn't bringing what I was. "We need to talk," I said. "Conference C." He wiped his hands, clicked the screwdriver closed, and followed without a question. Security waited outside, a courtesy, an insult. I couldn't tell. Inside, the room smelled like new carpet and printer heat. I held the form like a blade and tried to dull it with words. "The company is moving forward with termination for cause," I said. "Unauthorized access to the server room, deviation from assigned order of operations, and an unapproved schedule change." He stood there, with his hands at his sides, palms showing like he had nothing to hide. He didn't look at my blouse, or my shape, or over my shoulder for an exit. He looked at me, and I hated that I wanted him to give me a reason to stop. "I understand," he said. His voice didn't break. It did something worse. It stayed gentle. "You can appeal," I said quickly. "The union can." He shook his head once. "I won't put you through that." "This isn't about me," I snapped, and then swallowed. "It shouldn't be about me." My throat burned. "You did the right thing." "I did my job," he said. "Sometimes that's the right thing. Sometimes the paper doesn't agree." I tried again. "Is there anything you want in the file? Your statement?" He thought for a beat. "Write that I shut the valve because the line was sweating and I didn't want to turn a warning into a failure. Write that I left the sign because grown people still slip in shoes that cost more than my rent. Write that I'm not mad." He paused. "And write that I'm tired." I set the paper down as if it might scream. "We'll need your badge." My voice was small. "There's a check waiting downstairs. HR will—" He unclipped the badge, set it carefully beside the form, and smoothed the lanyard as if tidiness could be a kindness. "May I say something before I go?" he asked. I nodded. If he cursed me, I'd deserve it. If he begged, I'd break. "You're careful," he said. "That's not the same as being afraid. Don't let them confuse the two for you." The words landed in a place I didn't admit existed. "I'm not afraid," I said automatically. "I know." He smiled, not at me, but at the small truth between us. "I'll get my things." Security walked him to the locker room. I sat alone with the form, listening to the hum embedded in walls when everyone pretends silence. At 2:10, the fire alarm chirped once, twice, then began to wail. The hall erupted in orderly panic, doors opening, heels hitting tile, someone laughing the way people do when they want to make fear look like a joke. "Drill?" I asked the floor warden. "Not scheduled," she said, hand already on her radio. We funneled toward the stairwell. The elevator doors slid shut with a warning beep. I counted heads out of habit, out of the training we all yawned through twice a year. On the landing, someone's voice shook. I think I twisted my ankle. 2 flights down, the stairwell bottlenecked. Miss Hahn from legal sat on the step, face grey, breath short. "I'm fine," she gasped. She wasn't. The crowd split around her, the way currents part for a rock. And then he was there, impossible and inevitable. Malachi, without a badge, moving upstream like he belonged to another set of rules. He crouched not too close. "May I help?" he asked, and waited for Miss Hahn's nod before he touched her. He slid one arm behind her back, braced her ankle with the other, and lifted with a mechanic's economy, not a hero's show. He didn't look at me. He looked at the stairs, at the people, at the breeze of the open door below. "Open palms," he murmured to her as if it was a spell. "Breathe like this, in for 4, out for 6. She matched him, shaky but steadier. He carried her down 2 flights like weight wasn't an argument, just a fact to be respected. When he set her on a chair in the lobby, the alarm cut. We stood in the thudding quiet, hearts still sprinting. The warden's radio crackled. "False alarm," someone said, annoyed. Contractor triggered a sensor. People laughed. The kind of laughter that erases fear and the thing you owe the person who caught you. They drifted back toward elevators and email. I moved toward him. "You're not supposed to be here," I said. "It came out wrong." "I was turning in my key," he said, and the faintest smile tugged. "Now I have. Miss Hahn, are you okay?" She nodded, eyes bright wet. "Thank you." He looked at me then. "I'll go." "Wait." I hated the plea in my voice. "Wait." We stepped to the side of the lobby, beneath a potted tree that didn't know what floor it lived on. The air smelled like damp coats and relief. My pulse had nowhere to put itself. "You didn't have to do that," I said. He tilted his head. "Sure, I did." I studied the tile, the way reflections on polished stone double the world. "I'm sorry," I said, the words small and exact, "for the way this happened, for the paper, for being the person who handed it to you." He took the apology like he took everything, without theatrics, with care. "You were playing the position the way they told you." He glanced at the badges streaming past us. "Positions are like ladders. Sometimes they forget there's a ground." Where will you go? I asked, hating how personal it sounded, how much it exposed what I wanted to keep wrapped. He lifted a shoulder. I got cousins in Westover, a church that knows me. Work finds people who work. He looked at his hands as if checking that they were still there. I'll be okay. Will you? I stopped. Will you resent me? Will you think of me as the woman who did this because she was afraid? Will you ever look at me and not see the paper? I chose the smallest question, which felt like the truest one I could manage without breaking. Will you let me know you got there safe? His eyes warmed, then cooled, a tide you can't command. I'll tell the front desk to leave a note for you. That's not. I reached into my bag and pulled out a card with my work number and scrawled my personal cell on the back. My hand shook more than I wanted it to. If you want, no obligation. He took the card between his thumb and first finger like it was fragile. Okay. A silence opened that wasn't empty. It was the space people leave for choices to breathe. He put the card in his pocket. He held out his hand, palm up, an offer, not a test. I put my hand in his. It was warm, dry, calloused, human. No lightning, no swelling music, just the way some touches tell the truth about the person offering them. His grip was firm and then gone. Goodbye, Miss Shaw, he said. Ava, I said, before I could stop myself. My name is Ava. He smiled with his eyes finally. Goodbye, Ava. He walked toward the doors, not fast, not slow. The security guard looked like he wanted to object, then didn't. People slid around Malachi like water around a stone, like he had always been there and always would be, whether or not they remembered his name. I stood in a lobby washed by afternoon light and understood that the ladder I'd been climbing wasn't the only way to measure up. The ground was here, messy, inconvenient, made of choices with people inside them. I'd made one that hurt someone I respected. I couldn't make that untrue, but there were other choices left. By the time I got back upstairs, the COO wanted a debrief. I said we'd schedule one. I sat at my desk, pulled his form from the file, and wrote the statement he'd asked me to write word for word. Then I added my own. Employees' actions prevented a larger incident. Deviation from protocol prioritized safety and critical equipment. Recommend policy review. I signed my name like a promise to myself. At 7:42 p.m., when the building was mostly quiet and the sky had the bruised color of a day that didn't apologize, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I didn't move for 3 rings. On the 4th, I answered. Hello? Miss Ava? His voice was close and far, like he was speaking through night air. It's Malachi. I got home. I closed my eyes, not to block anything, but to hold the sound more carefully. Thank you for calling. A pause. I wanted you to know. That's all. I could have let it end, safe and neat. Instead, I said the thing that would tilt whatever this was toward the truth. It isn't all. On the line, a soft exhale, the kind people make when they set something down without dropping it. No, he said, I don't think it is. The night after his call, I lay awake and watched the ceiling turn from navy to grey. Somewhere between half sleep and a confession I couldn't make yet, I realized the ache in my ribs wasn't only guilt. It was the outline of a choice I hadn't finished making. At 8:03 a.m., I printed 3 pages. A revised emergency response protocol that put safety and critical infrastructure ahead of sequence, a staffing ladder to prevent a single custodian from handling 3 floors alone, and a recommendation to convert the on-call line from a shared inbox no one watched to a real rotating phone. I wrote it clean, no flourish, with citations to the very slide deck IT had used to scold us. The COO's assistant tried to wedge me into Friday. Today, I said, 15 minutes. At 10:20, I walked into her office carrying the papers and the steadiness Malachi had borrowed me when he said positions forget the ground. The COO read fast, tapping a pen. You're asking us to admit the old process was wrong. I'm asking us to admit it was incomplete, I said. It almost cost us more than a mop could fix. She pinched the bridge of her nose. HR will hate the precedent. They'll hate the liability more, I said, and slid over the incident report with my addendum. We disciplined the one person who acted. We should fix the system that made acting look like breaking rules. Something shifted in her posture, barely. A line of annoyance unclenched into something like respect. Fine, she said. Pilot it on 40 through 42. If it doesn't create chaos, we'll scale. She paused. And the termination? My throat tightened. We were wrong. Her eyebrows lifted a fraction, like a tide. Do you want to reverse it? He has a union, I said carefully. He can grieve. And do you want to invite that fight? Yes, I said, surprising us both with how simple it felt. Because it's ours. She stared at me like I had misread the script and somehow given the right line anyway. Draft the language, she said. Run it by legal, quietly. I left with my hands trembling, then steadied them by pushing open the stairwell door and walking the 42 flights down and up again, counting breaths, counting landings, finding the ground with each step. When I reached the lobby, the front desk guard looked up. You okay? He asked, not unkindly. Working on it, I said. Did Malachi leave anything yesterday? He said he might. The guard slid open a drawer and handed me a small envelope with my name written in block letters. Inside was a folded paper towel, clean and absurd, and a note. Ava, keep this in your pocket if you're going to walk floors. The cleaner leaves film at the edges. Wipe your heel before you step. M. It was the most practical tenderness I'd ever held. I texted him, the number now in my phone without ceremony. Thank you for the note. I'm making changes. I'd like to tell you in person if you want. Coffee near Westover, my treat. No obligation. I expected silence or a polite deflection. What came back 10 minutes later was both and neither. There's a community centre off Barton. I help on Thursdays with the gym floor and the after-school snack. If you want to see me, come there. 4 p.m. See me here, I read aloud to the empty corridor. Not at a cafe I could control, not on a schedule I could dominate. Where he lived a piece of his life. Where the ground would not be the marble floors of the company that had fired him. At 3:47 I parked outside a low brick building with a mural of hands passing a basketball, hands of every shade. Kids, voices drifted through the open door, the bright chaos of unsupervised joy. A woman at a folding table glanced up over her glasses. You're looking for Malachi, she said, amused. Is it that obvious? You're wearing a skirt too nice for the gym. She smiled. I'm Miss Evelyn. He's inside. Wipe your shoes. I did, then stepped into a room that smelled like wood wax and orange slices. Malachi was on his knees, taping the baseline, a clean blue stripe, while 2 8-year-olds argued about whether the tape should be laser straight or like lightning. He let them debate and kept his hand steady. When he looked up, his face didn't perform surprise or pleasure. It just opened. Hey, he said. Hey, I said, aware of my voice going softer than it did in boardrooms. I brought snacks. I lifted a brown paper bag like a peace flag. Nothing with peanuts. Miss Evelyn cackled from the table. Then you read the sign, which puts you ahead of half my volunteers. He stood, wiped his palms on his jeans, and walked toward me. Not too close, not saying my name like it was a test. The kids cut between us with the manic obedience of puppies. He let them pass, an old choreography. You came to the ground, he said lightly. I did, I said, and I brought granola bars that taste like hope and disappointment. He laughed, soft, the sound I hadn't heard yet but had suspected, like a car starting clean. We'll take 'em. He shifted the bag to a table, then motioned toward a side door. Want to see the floor? We stepped into the supply nook. It was better lit than the executive hallway and less forgiving. Scuffed mop buckets, a radio with a crack in its case, shelves of cleaners labelled in thick marker. He handed me a roll of blue tape. Pull, he said. Don't yank. Let the weight do the line. I pulled. The tape unspooled with a whisper, straight as a taut truth. He watched the angle of my wrist. Good, he said. You've got an eye. I have 6 policies, I said, but I'm learning the floor. He nodded, approval living in the slight lift of his chin. You said you're making changes. I told him everything. The pilot, the staffing ladder, the on-call phone, the draft to legal, the piece of humility I'd asked the company to sign. He listened with his whole body, shoulders loose, hands still, like the words were a project we might lift together. And your job? He asked when I finished. I still have it, I said. For now. And you want to reverse mine. I want to reverse ours, I said. Because you're right, Malachi. We keep pretending ladders are the only way to get high, but the roof sits on the ground. He smiled again, this time with a small shake of his head at my metaphor, not unkind. You wrote that down? Not the roof part, I said, but the rest. The door banged and a boy skidded in, sock sliding. Coach Mal! The tape ripped. He excused himself with a glance that didn't apologize. I followed. He knelt. showed the boy how to anchor the end with his shoe, then how to hold the roll low so it wouldn't flutter. "You don't fight the tape," he said. "You work with the pull." The boy nodded solemnly, then sprinted away. Malachi stood and looked at me like he could see the admission forming. I let it. "I fired you," I said, plain, "and then watched you carry Miss Lyle's hand down the stairs like it was the most ordinary thing. You could have made me small about it. You didn't. You could have cursed me. You didn't. You left me a paper towel so I wouldn't slip." I swallowed. "I'm sorry for what I did, and I'm grateful for who you are." He took the words the way he took everything, without grabbing, without letting them fall. "Thank you," he said. Then, after a beat, "Are you apologizing for the paper or asking me for something new?" "Both," I said, heat rising in my cheeks. Thick, curvy, sexy had never felt like armor less than it did in his gaze. It didn't feel like a weapon either. It felt like a body telling the truth about being human in a room with another human. "I'm asking if you'll let me learn you. Not to fix what I broke. There's paperwork for that. To start something that doesn't pretend ladders are the point." He considered me, not as a manager, not as absolution. As a person who had done harm and was trying to do good without pretending the harm didn't count. The gym echoed with a ball hitting the rim. Laughter, Miss Evelyn's corralling whistle. "Okay," he said finally, "but slow, like tape. Let the weight make the line." "Slow," I agreed. We didn't touch. Not yet. We passed granola bars, we refereed an argument about travelling, we showed a girl how to sweep in long overlapping strokes. He stood behind her and corrected her hands without touching. Hover, ask, place, steady, let go. I watched and learned a new protocol without a meeting. When the kids were gone and the floor gleamed under the cheap lights, we sat on the bottom bleacher, knees almost touching. The air smelled like lemon, and whatever the opposite of corporate air is. "Will your company take you back?" I asked. "That's not the only good outcome," he said. "But it's one. Do you want it?" He looked past the basketball hoop at nothing and everything. "I want to work where people don't get punished for being careful. If your pilot makes that possible, sure." He glanced at me, mouth tilting. "I also want to see where you put that paper towel." "In my bag," I said, laughing. "Like a talisman." We walked out together under a sky the colour of tin. At his truck, he held the door for me to look at a little wooden star hanging from the mirror. "My niece," he said. "She makes them when I fix her bike." He touched it the way he'd touched the dent in his thermos, like its meaning had weight. "I want to be the kind of person your niece would give a star to," I said, and did not care how foolishly earnest it sounded. He didn't tease. "Be the kind of person who gives yourself one when no one's watching." A week later, the pilot passed without chaos. Legal cleared the language. The COO signed. HR drafted the reversal with an apology that didn't say the word sorry, but translated to it if you read with your heart. Malachi chose to come back part-time, not because he needed us, but because the ground we stood on might hold both of us if we tended it. On his first day back, we met in the executive corridor, between a caution sign and a server room that now had a laminated card listing the emergency order we'd written together. He stood with his palms easy. I stood without armor, silk, still silk, but not my only skin. "Open palms," I said. "Open palms," he echoed. We didn't rush. We let time do its pull. Then, when the moment belonged to both of us, he reached, slow, visible, and I stepped closer, steady, choosing, and the touch we'd both earned was gentle, sure, and strong. Not a spectacle. A line, clean and true, from the ground we'd found to wherever we were going next.